Hello, everybody. This is Mike.
And this is Beth.
And this is episode 4 of the Hey, Are You Still There podcast. How you feeling this morning, Beth?
Do you mean about life in general or about the podcast?
Either.
Life in general, I'm feeling a little old and tired. I'm going to have to get on my big 12 little 50 to turn my attitude around.
Well, you had a late night last night.
I did.
A later night than usual. So what we did last night is, in full disclosure, Beth and I, and we'll get into some of this later on in other podcasts as we talk about marriage hobbies. We're going to actually, that's going to be one of our subjects today as we talk about our marriage portion. One of the things we like to do is go to Broadway shows. And we've seen 25 to 30 Broadway shows. Mm-hmm. And my absolute all-time favorite is Wicked.
Mine too.
And I've seen it 5 times. Beth has not seen it that many.
But I've seen it a lot.
4.
No. Okay.
I went with
Flexing.
Maria one time. I am flexing.
You are flexing.
And so I was...
and I loved Wizard of Oz more than you did growing up.
I dealt that.
As an only child, that was all I had to look forward to, was pretending to be Dorothy on the yellow brick road in my living room.
When you were a kid, did your parents take you over there to the...
No, but when I was an adult, I took my children with
So in
your
North
parents.
Carolina, there used to be a theme park toward the Wizard of Oz. And when I was young, when I was a little kid, my parents would take me every year. Loved the Wizard of Oz. And then it got shut down, it overgrown, blah, blah, blah. And then somebody bought it several years ago and they reopened it like 2 weekends a year in the fall, something like that. And so one time my parents and Beth took the kids and they all dressed up and it was real cute.
And Josh wasn't even alive yet. It was like just Jacob and Maria.
He was alive in our hearts.
Yeah, he was.
So anyhow, the new Wicked movie came out. Beth was not that excited because let's face it, sometimes
the movies disappoint based on books and things.
And I was not. I was going to see it, but I was cautious about it. Not even cautiously optimistic. And so, but Maria was dying to see it, so it came out 2 nights ago, I think. So last night, Beth, Maria, and I went and saw Wicked in the theater. What's your thoughts, Beth?
Okay. See, they were really harsh and mean to me when I say they, Maria and Mike, because I am a purist. And part of me believes you just need to leave the theater production alone. Just like some books are just so good standalone. When you try to make a movie, it's always disappointing. This movie was fabulous. It only covers the first half of the Broadway play. It was, the actresses and actors were great. It was, the music was good. There's just, for me though, nothing will ever compare to that Broadway show experience. I do get though, I like that they make a movie because I also get that not everyone will go to see a Broadway play. So it is cool that it's out there for everybody else to see. But there's just, and we won't spoil it, but at the end, there's 1 or 2 things that I would have tweaked if I'd been producing the movie. And there's a few things that I was like, I think that the songs are powerful enough on their own. I will say I cried a few times during it, but I also have to say that just before the halftime break in the Broadway play, I cry every time every time as she sings that song. It's beautiful and it's amazing, and I cry every time at the Broadway play.
Yeah, so in letting you guys know, this is not a spoiler. This is, in the play, in the musical, Defying Gravity is the intermission. They do Defying Gravity, break for intermission, you come back. This movie, the entire musical is like 2.5 hours long, 2 hours and 40 minutes. This movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes. But they end at Defying Gravity.
Yeah.
This is part 1. Like when it starts, you see it says Wicked Part 1. This is a 2-part movie.
Yeah.
So in all, it's going to be probably close to 5 hours. Yeah. And so that's one of the things I was concerned about is what were they going to add to stretch it. I thought this movie was perfect. I thought that it was beautifully done. I sat there and I was like, this is going to be the Wizard of Oz for this generation. The Wizard of Oz movie itself now is like 100 years old.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be the Wizard of Oz for the next 100 years. It's beautifully done. It's magical. The music is perfect. I was concerned if Ariana Grande could pull off her role, and the other girl, I didn't even know who she was. They were absolutely perfect, and I found myself there was times in the theater where people applauded, and I wanted to be that person. And I did applaud at the end, which sounds so stupid because I always used to make fun of those people who would applaud at movies, but it was so well done. It was just beautiful. I have no complaints about it. I thought it was, for a movie adaptation, it was the best I've ever seen.
Well, and I just want to throw in too, if there's somebody that doesn't even know what it's about, I think what was so powerful the first time I saw the Broadway show, and I had read the book after the Broadway show. The Broadway show, thank goodness, takes a lot of liberties with the book. The Broadway show is much better than the book, in my opinion. But it turns the Wizard of Oz upside down. And as a kid who literally, back in the Stone Ages when we lived, when we barely had electricity and running water, you had to wait for things to come on TV. And so I would wait and watch it. And I just remember when I went to that first Broadway play and they had turned everything, because essentially the characters are much deeper and richer, and the people that you think maybe are good characters versus bad characters, some of that is turned upside down on this backstory. I remember it just blew my mind, and I thought it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And again, that Defying Gravity is probably one of the most powerful songs and scenes.
And I thought they did a good job of portraying the morals of the movie, like of the musical in this movie, in that the lessons that are learned, the uniqueness of people, standing up for yourself, having a voice, that's what's beautiful about this movie and about the musical itself. So,
and about two people that are really different, that hate each other, but if they spend some time together, they see each other's humanity and develop. I think that's the other thing. It's just a friendship for the people who haven't seen it, but a friendship that develops, and there was really beautiful. And that's actually the part that made me cry.
Yeah. And so, go see it. Yeah, I cannot recommend it enough. If you're a fan of the musical, you will not be disappointed. If you have no idea what the musical about, I think you're going to be blown away with this movie. It's rated PG. Mm-hmm. There is nothing. There's some intense scenes at the end, as far kind of like Wizard of Oz. Action, kind of like Wizard of Oz is toward the end, or different things. But it's rated PG, super clean. It's long. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes, so you got to consider that when you're taking kids. Yeah. But if you want to take kids, but it is so good. I will probably go see it again. Yeah. I mean, it was so good. All right. So,
and by the way, and Maria got a special cup that is shaped like a witch's hat to have her drink in. Because she always has to have bling.
She just had that.
Which we said will end up under her bed or in a pile in our bonus room, we think. But she insists that it won't.
Yes, because all her cups end up somehow magically, she says, on some, she's displaying them. But
although pieces of one cup is in there now in our kitchen. But anyway.
So last week we did a poll question. Our poll question for the week last week was about cats versus dogs. Lots of comments about this. Beth, I'm going to read you some of them, and we're going to just.
Are they going to make me angry?
Up. No, not at all. No, the comments really lean towards you. It says, here's somebody says, Tommy and I listen together, and dog or cat poll, put 2 down for dogs. We love cats and dogs, but for companionship, dogs are the best.
I agree.
So that was one comment. Let's see what else we have here. Taryn says, I'm with you, Beth. Team dog all day.
Aww.
My dog Memphis was a rescue as well. He's been with me 12 years now and has been the best companion to me.
What a great name.
Yeah, and I hope that means Taryn's single, because if she has a husband, I would feel pretty bad knowing that the dog is a better companion in life. That's all I'm pointing out. Let's see here. A couple more comments. Mrs. Hinton, she says, I'm allergic to both, so I personally prefer chickens. That's good.
Oh, that's good. We didn't have a... does not apply to other category,
Here's what she says, though. But if I had no allergies, I would have cats for sure. So that's kind of the comments there. And as far as that, now we had a poll that was up. The poll, which is very simple: cats, dogs. What do you prefer? Now, regardless of what the comments said, the cats won the poll 70% to 30%. So out of everyone who voted, 70% of the people preferred cats, 30% preferred dogs.
Do you know what this tells me?
Yeah, what?
Cat lovers take the easy way out. They just want to click a button. Dog lovers, they are so committed to their love of their dogs that they will explain it. They will write a detailed analysis to explain to you all the reasons dogs are better.
I think this is a cat-dog thing. I think dogs, as I said last week, just love everybody, extroverted, blah, 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 whatever. And so, of course, they're going to do word vomit on these comments.
Oh, whatever.
Cat people are just like, click, I'm done with you. And
well, that is true, yeah.
So
they're kind of cold and
I'm
detached.
not, you were a math minor, correct?
Yes, yeah.
All right, I'm not good at math, but I do understand numbers and percentages pretty well. The week before last, we did the tree decorating. I got 100% of the votes. Wait until after Thanksgiving. This week, 70% of the votes went my way. Beth, 170% of the people agree with me on everything so far.
Do you know what? This is
170% to 30%.
This
Beth.
is just the people that are choosing to vote. This is just like when they did those polls in the election and they would text me every day or text you and they would say to you, "Hey Maria, who are you voting for?" And you would write back some nonsense because you're not even Maria. That's what this is like. This is who they may be out there paying people to just respond to this poll.
170% of the people agree with me.
You know
That's
what?
all I'm saying.
If this is the only win you have this week, then you can have it. Because
all right. Well, you know what? We have a new poll this week.
Okay.
And as we've been thinking through the formatting of this, we love, and it seems like we've gotten a lot of great comments and just people texting us or emailing us, whatever, just saying how much they like the breakdown of marriage, family, career, ministry. And, and that kind of is mixed up every week so far. We don't necessarily lead with one every single week, but we do touch on all four. But they're enjoying the polls. I had a couple people say that they liked being able to ride in the car with their family, listen to us express our opinions over certain topics, and then they actually pause the podcast and have the discussion in the car themselves with them, husband and wife, or husband, wife, and kids, and so
I'm sure multiple families were responding based on how many listeners we have. I'm sure this is just tens of thousands of families doing
we have
this.
a lot. We have a lot. I won't get into the numbers, but it's looking good.
Yeah.
So here's the poll for this week. Here's the discussion, and these come out of real time. So this week I was having a discussion with someone, I'll call him Ross. Ross and I were talking, and we were talking about reading books.
Yeah.
And Ross asked this question. He said, "Is it reading a book if you listen to it?"
Oh my gosh.
And immediately I said no.
No.
And I said, "What do you think?" And Ross said no. And so we got into this whole discussion about how people who say they read books, but all they're doing is listening to a book on Audible or whatever it may be. That's not really reading. You're just listening to a 12-hour podcast. That reading a book, if you say I read a book, you've got to have your Kindle, you've got to have the paper version, you got to have something in your hand, your eyeballs are going line to line, turning the pages. That is what reading a book is, not listening. So the poll question for this week is it reading a book if you listen to it? What do you think, Beth?
Well, first of all, I'm shocked by the position you're taking because as a deeply spiritual person and the views you have from a religious standpoint, your view on this seems very legalistic. Because I think you're doing, I guess, would it be function over form? How you say it? I disagree because there have been times that I am so into the book because I read a lot of books. Therefore, I feel like as the person who probably reads more books than anyone in this household, I can be an expert on this, at least in our family unit. There's some times when I'm enjoying the story so much that if I can get the book, because I get a lot of books from the library, big plug for if you go to your public library, you can download this app Libby and you can read books on your Kindle as well as do the audiobooks. Sometimes I'll have both. So I'll read at night And then if I go for a run or a walk or I'm working during the day, I'm listening to the story. And then I pick up where I left off. So by your logic, I've only read half the book, even if I complete the entire book. I mean, and what about now? Like, we're getting old and our eyes don't work. What if I want to listen more because I can barely see the page and reading's like harder for me? It's about experiencing the story. And I don't think it's the same as just listening to a podcast, because we're just rambling. Like, we're not like telling a story, developing a story arc, developing characters, developing world building. If we have a book that's fantasy, we're not doing any of that. I would strongly argue that listening is reading. And also, that's how reading starts. My mom read to me when I was a kid. That's probably what started my love of books. She read to me, and then eventually I read along with the book.
Okay, listen to me. Here's where I'm at. I'm going to bring up 2 points, and then we're just going to leave it to the people.
Okay.
All right?
Who will probably side with you, the easy click people on the polls. But
Yes.
anyway.
I'm glad you brought up kids. So you're a parent. You have a 1-year-old. Let's just go 1 year, 2 year, whatever. You're reading them the little critter books.
Yes.
When that kid gets older, if they never pick up another little critter book again, and you said, hey, have you ever read a little critter book? What are they going to say?
They're going to say yes.
They're going to say no.
No,
They've never read a book. Their parents read it to them.
It doesn't, but they know the story. They know the book by heart.
It
They
doesn't
have
matter.
read it.
Then they can watch the movie. All
That's
right?
not the
That's
same.
all it
No.
is. All an audiobook is a movie without pictures. Okay?
Oh my gosh.
And the other thing is, I don't think it's humanly possible to truly multitask. I think that when you multitask, not everything you're doing, nothing is getting your full attention. That if you're working on one singular thing, it's getting all your attention, and it's going to be done better than if you're trying to do that thing plus 2 or 3 other things. There's been times I've walked into the bathroom, you're in there putting on your makeup, listening to an audiobook, looking at text, you're doing like 3 or 4 different things, and I'm like, there is no way you're consuming this book by doing 2 or 3 other things besides this.
That's because you're neurotypical. I'm neurodivergent. My brain operates in a different... No, I'm serious. Listen.
You millennials and Gen Zers with your made-up terms.
No, listen. My brain functions in a different way. I actually can focus better sometimes if I'm moving while I'm doing something.
Right.
Because it helps me focus. If I just sit still...
Well, listen.
I can't...
Attorney Beth, you stated your case. Okay?
Well,
I think I've stated my case. We're going to leave it in the hands of the jury, our fans.
You're also not taking into account people who learn and process in different ways. Some people may be auditory processors, and so I'm just like, there's just different ways that people...
Has Stevie Wonder ever read a book?
Oh, gosh, yes.
No! Gosh, case closed.
Okay, you're going to get us canceled. And he would be at Braille. He could do Braille.
He could do Braille, that's right.
Does that count to you?
Yes.
Why?
Because he's reading.
No.
Physically.
Oh my gosh, that is the, again.
All right, listen, we're going to go ahead and get out. That's our intro. We wanted to kind of, each week, we're going to kind of jump into something that's hot. We jumped into the Wicked review. Yeah. We reviewed some comments, got a new poll question for you guys. Now let's get on with the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Careers. So last week I gave you the platform to share what you did for a living. Like, what is it that Beth does as an attorney? It was funny. And I say, I'm a simpleton, right? And I had to stop you midway and be like, look, I'm more confused now than I was. And I thought maybe it's just me. I'm dumb. I get it. But I was having a conversation with someone this week.
Let's call him Ross.
Let's call him Ross. And Ross said, I'm glad you stopped Beth, because I was totally lost. He said, I thought I knew what she did, but then when she started describing it, I'm like, I have no idea what she's talking about. And we agreed. I think I should have said, explain your job to us like we're in kindergarten. And so, because it's so complex, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it is like, you got a lot going on.
I'm like a nuclear physicist.
You are.
Yeah.
And then I was talking to another one of our listeners this week. We'll call him Sean. Sean said, man, he's like, I was listening to Beth's stuff. And when she finished, my first thought was, wow, Mike really does do more than Beth. What? And I thought, I swear, hand on the Bible, that's what he said.
That's because he's practically a comedian, though.
He's not very funny.
He was practicing stand-up comedy.
No, he's not a funny guy. Careers. It did get us talking this week. Just talking about that last week. You're a career attorney. I'm a career minister. From when we started, you started law school, I started Bible college, you had your first law job, I had my first ministry job. With where you started, is what you're doing what you thought it would be? Well, I'll let you go first.
Absolutely not. And that's because I know my job is confusing, but I don't even know that portions of my job existed when I had graduated law school and passed the bar. Like, there are things, the world is changing so fast. It's almost like I look at the majors for our kids and they'll be like, oh, supply chain management or, all these cybersecurity roles. Those would have been things that 50 years ago, somebody would be like, I don't even know what that is, but now they're majors. So I think part of it is that your job changes, like the opportunities change. But also for me, I think most people have a very, like the idea of a lawyer is that person that goes to court and stands up in trial. And there's so many other things that lawyers do. I also think for me, early in my career, I thought there was like this perfect right way to do it. And I remember I would take notes, like if there was a lawyer that I really admired their style or thought they knew what they were talking about, and I would write down like, oh, well, this is how you should respond to this, as opposed to like realizing there's a lot of different ways to do my job. But you bring part of who you are to it. You bring part of your personality there. But I thought, I didn't know really hardly any lawyers growing up or anything. So I thought that lawyers were like I viewed maybe doctors, or at that time, I know everyone will laugh, politicians. I thought they'd be really well respected and people would probably listen to them and, respect their opinion. And that is not the case generally. People probably don't listen to me. They make
lawyer jokes for a reason.
I know, but I try to be a good lawyer, and I try to be like not only an advocate for my client,
like Matt Murdock. You're a good lawyer.
I try to be a partner with my client, and so what I'm saying is like it's just one thing that's been stunning for me is how often people maybe don't respect your advice or don't listen to you, or all the people now who can Google something, so they think because they've used Chat GPT and asked AI how something works, they think that, they understand something you've spent your entire career doing. So I think that those things, I also would have never imagined that I would just spend so much time in meetings. Like, okay, so if I were explaining it to a kindergartner, what do? I pretty much go to meetings, I feel like, all day. And then I have to carve out a little bit of time to write or to think or to process and to problem solve. But the type of work that I do, I very much have to solve problems most of the time. I feel like on the spot. They're very time sensitive questions, and there's not always a lot of time to do because that's the other thing. Law school set me up to spend so much time researching, and you would just spend weeks writing a brief, for example, weeks and weeks, and you would do all this research looking for the perfect case. There's no time for that. So I have to be super efficient. And I have to just decide at times like this, I have to let this go. This has to be good enough. I have to let this go because I have to move on to the next fire that's burning. So those were things that I definitely didn't expect about my career, and wouldn't have known. Like what I do now, I could have not even imagined that I would be doing something like that right when I graduated law school.
And you've had kind of, you've been all over the place. As you graduated, I'll brag on you. You got into one of the top law schools in the country. You graduated at the top of the class in said law school. You went from there and you clerked for a federal court judge. So you were like in court all the time, seeing how this judge works, seeing cases and trials and things like that.
That was also strikingly different than I thought it would be.
Yeah. And then you went from there to a very large law firm here in North Carolina, really in the country. And you worked there for a while. And then when we started to grow in our family, you transitioned out and became in-house counsel for your undergrad college and worked there for a while. And then ultimately the position opened up at the hospital where you went, and now you've been in-house there for almost 19 years. So you've done basically everything you can do as an attorney, from trial work to big firm to small,
really small
educational college.
I'm the only attorney there.
Yeah,
person.
to now, a hospital system that has grown over the last 19 years to one of the top 3 or 4 largest in the country. So you've done a lot, and I'm sure there's no way you could have predicted back then. And the same with me. I was under the delusion that all ministry really was preaching and visitation, and that was it. Because that's all they teach you in Bible college and Christian universities when you're studying ministry is. You take all these Bible classes and study and that's great and that's fine. And you have a few little classes on counseling or things like that, but they don't prepare you for ministry. And just like the world's changed in the legal field, the world's changed in ministry. Like I remember growing up, I would when I was 19, 20 years old, I'd go along with ride-alongs with my pastor, right? Because at that point, I knew I wanted to be in ministry. And he would go visiting, and he'd go visit shut-ins, and he'd go visit people at night, and go visit people in nursing homes. And that doesn't happen anymore. Like, there's no visitation. I don't know any pastors that really visit anymore. And there's no one that really expects that. That's kind of changed. And the whole sermon thing, at the end of the day, that's 4 hours of my month, 4 30-minute sermons. I read 2 hours of my month.
Online, I've seen where people can buy sermons.
Yes,
or people
gosh, don't even get me started.
There's stuff like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can deliver it or anything, but I'm just saying like that, again, kind of like with mine when I'm talking about Chat GPT. Like, anybody would think, I can be a pastor, I can preach.
There are ministry AI programs now where you can go say, give me a 3-point outline on love from the book of John, and it will spit out an entire sermon for you immediately.
Right.
This is just going to make lazy pastors even lazier.
Yeah.
And we'll get in. That's a whole other topic for another day. Is our peers. But what I do, if someone said, you've been doing this now for 28 and a half years, what has the majority of your time been doing? Majority of my time has been either counseling or just leading, like just leading people into mission trips, leading them through various things throughout the church, ministry type stuff.
Which means dealing with a lot of conflict sometimes and tension and things like that.
Exactly. People have different ideas on how you need to do things, and you're trying to figure out who can play together in the same sandbox, because people might have the exact same idea of how to do what they want to accomplish in a ministry goal, but they go about it 2 totally different ways, and that builds conflict. And there's been a lot of great people in our churches over the years that want the same thing, but cannot get along because
they want to do it
different ways. And I'm sitting there trying to navigate that. But sermonizing, like writing the sermons, that's such a small percentage on the pie chart of what I do. And even though I preach every week, it's 30 minutes, and there is prep time that goes into that. But, you look at an entire work week, it's not that much compared to the other things. And so I think ministry, Bible colleges would do, and Christian universities would do so much better if they had more hands-on. Like, how do you counsel people? How do you do conflict resolution? How do you deal with families going through divorce? How do you deal with premarital stuff? How do you deal with, just brokenness in people? They don't teach you that. That's on-the-job training. And, man, I made more mistakes in ministry than I have successes because I didn't know what I was doing early on. And people would leave our church very angry at me. And looking back, I'm like, well, they had a right to be angry at me. But also, they were trusting a 29, 30-year-old guy that at that point had, 7 or 8 years of experience and not much, I don't know if, it's kind of like, you want to go to a doctor that's been doing this a while. You know what I mean? It's like you get that kid right out of med school and expect them to have the perfect operation with no complications. You're probably kidding yourself, right? And that's kind of early on. That was a lot of it. And I struggled. I had a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, especially early on, just from I didn't handle things very well, and there was people that expected more. So, I think ministry-wise, I wasn't prepared for the hurt too. So I just think lawyer and ministry both are just very similar in what you envision pastors and lawyers do
versus what we do
is so different.
Well, 2 things I wanted to add. Well, 3 things. One thing you left out that I think you're excellent at, that I think it's hard to put a number on it because it's not necessarily something that you'd be like, oh, this takes 10% of my week, but casting vision. Like, you cast the vision for what we are as a church and a nonprofit. And I think about, like, just thinking outside the box, casting that vision. That's one of those things. I don't know if that's considered a soft skill or what that would be, in the work world, but that's something that's extremely valuable. But, you can't sit around and say, well, I spend this much time casting the vision, but that's a lot of what you do. You have the vision, and then you articulate and, like, mobilize the people towards that vision. The other thing I was going to say is one thing you hit on too. That's why doctors do residencies and stuff, and I think it was the same thing with me. I remember there's this class, civil procedure, and we talked about, like, a complaint versus a motion to dismiss versus a motion for summary judgment. We talked about them in concept and, like, wrote those, but until I worked in the court and saw the system play out, I didn't really even, I was like, it was like a light bulb went off, like, oh, this is the difference in what these 2 things do. And the same thing at work, like you said, just that you come out and you've got, like, the way to think, maybe, the basics, but you don't know how to apply it.
Right.
And I think the final thing for both of us is, and I don't know how much of this is the jobs we do versus our personality, but the one thing you also can't put a number on is the heaviness sometimes of the weight we carry. So, I know people will joke and be like, oh, well, you don't do very much, but it's a lot of weight to carry. Like, I sometimes have to see really hard stuff at work that people don't think about. Like, early in my career, like advising on different, like, child abuse cases, or just doing things, like, you see weighty things, or you have decisions or choices that you're making in your work life. And it's really hard to just flip a switch and just be like, oh, this isn't going to impact me at home. And I think that's particularly in the ministry, something that's really, really hard is to, like, just turn that off. Like, when you care about the people as well, because you care about them, you love them, and it's hard to just flip a switch.
Yeah, I agree. And so, it is the ministry joke, you only work 2 hours a week.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that's taken home. There's a lot of conversations that go, I guess the hip modern term is offline.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell people, like, oh, I was up talking to this person dealing with this crisis, because it's their personal private information.
Right.
So you can't quantify and justify that.
Yeah, and you can't be like, or there's someone, I won't tell you who, because then everybody's going to wonder in a small church, who's that one person that he's having to put all this time into?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a job that you can just be like, oh, it's exactly 40 hours a week every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So,
so now next question. I wanted to know, Mike, because we've talked about this a little bit. Like, when I spoke, we talked about how I came up with what I was going to speak about. Since you do write these sermons and you talked about how you do it, I mean, it seems like you'd have it down to a science after all these years writing sermons, coming up with the ideas. How do you do that?
Well, there's this great program called Sermon AI.
For lazy pastors who only work an hour a week,
yes,
right?
Yes. It's gotten easier just because you've been doing it for 28 years. I think for me, the best thing that ever happened was when I was in youth ministry, we created a we transformed kind of our Sunday afternoon youth meeting into a youth worship service. And I preached every week to middle and high school kids. And you learn really quick what works and what doesn't work, because you're trying to keep a teenager's attention. And so I really cut my teeth preaching every week to 50 or 60 middle and high schoolers. And so then when I, started pastoring an adult church and adults, that part, I kind of was already in a rhythm. Man, these guys and gals that get out of seminary or Bible college and get these churches young, preaching, I feel for those churches. Those churches have to show them a lot of grace, because they haven't had the experience, and just because you may take a how to write a sermon class in Bible college doesn't mean you know how to present a sermon and effectively. And so for me, we'll just say now, what I've learned over the years, kind of what works is I am a series preacher, meaning that I have a series in mind, whether it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever. I know what this is a series I want to do. For example, Tim, the pastor at our church, and I sat down this week and kind of wrote our Christmas series, and that's going to start December 1st. And so we knew the topic, we knew kind of where we wanted it to go, and then it was sitting down, just putting the pieces together, like, oh man, this goes good, how about this? And just kind of brainstorming. And it's like painting, and it's like an artist, or it's like, really, sermon writing is like art. It's like writing poetry, or it's writing a song or music, or you're painting, anything like that. You're trying to create something that's going to be captivating, that hopefully will change someone's life when they hear it, or challenge them in some way or whatever. So for me, when I walk into a sermon, I'm like, all right, here's the series I want to preach. So I have the overarching big theme. This is where I want it to start. This is where I want it to end. Let me put the pieces together in the middle that build the bridge to get there. And then each week is broke up into different segments of this path. And for me, once I preach a sermon on Sunday, if the following Sunday is part 2 or part 3 or part 4 of that series, as soon as that sermon ends on Sunday, I'm already thinking about the next week, because I've already got it in my mind. This is where I want to go. And so Sunday, Monday, Tuesdays, I'm just jotting down notes. As things come to my mind, I'm jotting down notes. Usually by Thursday, I start to put it on paper. Friday, I clean it up real good with scriptures and points and bullet points and everything. And then I just chew on it for Friday, Saturday, and then go in Sunday and preach it.
That's what I was going to say. You carry it around in your head
all week.
Too.
Yeah. So, and there's ministers that I know that dedicate one day of the week. I'm going to go in on a Tuesday morning, lock myself in my office, stay in there until 5, write my sermon, and that's it. And then they don't break it out again until Saturday night. There's some pastors of mega churches that do their sermons on Saturdays intentionally, so it'll be fresh for Sunday. I don't get that. I don't do that. Just my rhythm is what's the big theme that we're going to be looking at over the next several weeks. How do you eat an elephant bite by bite? So what are the 4, 6, 5 bites I want to chew this up in? And then each week you just keep getting smaller. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so that's it. That's kind of how I write my sermon. And so there's not a dedicated sermon day for me. I couldn't even sit down and I couldn't even quantify how many hours I spend on a sermon, because the actual hours putting it on paper are probably less than 1 hour in an entire week. But I've thought about it constantly and thinking through things. And I've gotten to the point that, and I don't even write examples down anymore. Like in my sermons, I'll have a point and I'll have my bullet points, and then I'll just put EX and I'll leave it blank. And for me, it's kind of fun to see what the Holy Spirit is going to lay on my heart as I'm giving that. So I would say 90% of the examples I give in my sermons, I'm hearing for the first time myself. Like, I have not pre-thought about it. It's just in the moment, an example hits me, and I share it. And I think that's why people would call my preaching style conversational. You know, everyone says, man, it just feels like you're having a conversation with me, just one-on-one. It's because you don't think out, if I'm going to sit down and have coffee with you, I'm not going to sit here and think through that and, all right, what example am I going to give Beth? No, you just sit here and have a conversation, and if something pops in your head, like, oh yeah, it's like this, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I don't even write down examples anymore. I just let those come to me in the sermon.
So one thing that's interesting is, and we can talk about this another time, but I remember we used to debate this, as a lot of people would be like, well, I just let the Holy Spirit lead, which I think sometimes could be an excuse to be lazy. But and what I mean by that is people who use that as an excuse not to prepare at all. And I think that's the interesting thing about your technique. You're very prepared. It's not like you just show up on Sunday and you're like, I'm just going to be spirit led and have no preparation and just let whatever happens. You have a framework and a structure, but at the same time, you're not so rigid that, like I've also known you've told me sometimes, like you've thrown a point out or, like you're like, I'm not even going to talk about that point because it just didn't feel right. So you're not so rigid that you're like, well, this is what I wrote down. I can only talk about that. I feel like it's a happy medium between you're still prepared and structured, but you've left flexibility in there for the spirit to lead and for your examples and stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. And you're right. There has been times where I've had a sermon and it might be a 3-point, 4-point sermon, and I get to this one point and I can just tell people are either like, whoa, like, you can just see the wheels turning, or you see them checking out. Like, this really, and you're like, all right, I don't need to do the rest of this sermon, you know, because either they've gotten the point and they need to sit here and meditate and reflect on this, or I'm losing them. So let's just go ahead and wrap it up, I don't preach long. I try to 30 minutes max is what I like. As my friend Andy says, leave them hungry. Yeah. These guys that preach 40, 50 minutes, an hour, I don't know, man. They just want to hear themselves talk. I mean, nobody wants to hear that. And so no one consumes media like that, like
especially not anymore.
No, like this podcast is probably going to be 40, 50 minutes, but I don't know how many people are going to listen to the whole thing in one setting, unless you're driving or something. They're probably going to chew it up in bits. Or start it and be like, this is really terrible, and just never come back to it.
Well, and that's the hard part too with the sermon writing. Somebody could teach you the structure, or you could get it online and let AI do it, but then you can't do what you're talking about. That's the part you've got to learn through experience. Somebody can't teach you how to read your congregation, or how to emotionally connect, or what have you.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that. So I was this week, over the last couple of weeks, it's like we still have one kid at home, right? And he's different than our daughter, who's different than our older son, right? And so things that would work to motivate one kid isn't the same thing that motivates the second kid. And so it's kind of like sermon writing, in that what speaks to one person is not going to speak to somebody else. That, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to figure out, how can I say what I need to say in a sermon that's going to reach a congregation of 100, 200, 500, however big the church is, to hit everybody. It's kind of like that with kids and motivating them, to, whether it's clean their room, get good grades, behave the proper way. I remember when we were in youth ministry, we would have families that would have multiple kids in our youth ministry. And one kid would just be just perfect. And the other kid would be just such a hellion. And we would think, what went wrong with that kid? Like, what did those parents do that didn't work?
Yeah.
And so, what do you think? We've experienced that now as parents. That got me thinking, as you were talking about the sermons, I got to thinking about that as parents. Like, I have to think through, how do I motivate or encourage a non-believer versus a new believer versus someone who's been a Christian for 30 years? How do I speak the same thing to all of them, but motivate them differently, and it's the same way with kids. So what do you what have you found just looking at our three and how different they are?
I think it's about like when you love somebody, you get to know them and you know what they like and you know what they don't like. And I think it's like it's just about, again, living with the person, caring about the person, knowing the person. That's why you can't just follow a book. Because I remember with our firstborn, he was born early. I had a lot of pregnancy complications. And I'd read all those books on what you do to get a baby to sleep through the night. And basically, I had all these ideas of everything I would do that would be perfect. And I was like, I'm going to sleep train. I'm going to do all these things and it's going to work out. And nothing that I did worked. He didn't sleep through the night until after he was a year old. But he was also premature. And we had a very complex pregnancy. And when I had my second child, that was when she started sleeping through the night. She started sucking her thumb like at 10 weeks or 11 weeks. And that was my first indication that maybe it's not me and maybe this book doesn't have it all figured out. It's the kids themselves are different. I think it's the same way as they get older. You have to know your kids and really see them as individuals and see not just what you've been taught or what you think you should do. You have to see them as people to actually know them. And in some ways that sounds like it's really easy, but a lot of times that's actually really hard because that means you've got to set aside some of your own ideas of what they should be and see them for who they really are. So then you can figure out what it is that's going to motivate them.
Yeah, and I think for both, the common denominator in knowing your congregation and being able to speak to them in a way that everyone can react the way that they need to personally react. And the same thing with your kids. You've got to know them. You've got to know them. Ministers that are disengaged from their congregation, that don't, they're just up there on a stage. I don't know how you really preach to your people because you don't know them. You might as well just be preaching on a podcast, it's just generic, and so I'm able to communicate to the churches I've been at because I get to know the people. And I think it's the same way with your kids. I think the parents that are the most effective parents are the ones that learn their kids, study their kids, know their kids, realize that there's not a one size fits all, that what I use as far as encouragement or punishment or whatever for one kid is not going to be the same with the other kid and such.
But I think the other thing is also realizing they're individuals with their own minds. So you can do everything, quote, right, or everything, quote, wrong, or everything in between. And in the end, there's going to be a lot of things, too, you don't control because they're individuals with free will that are going to make their own choices.
Yeah.
Which is the other challenge in parenting is deciding when you intervene. Of course, when they're little, you're like, no, don't touch that. And you try to teach them versus as they get older when you're like,
that's
you just got to let them do it. Yeah.
Trying to parent adult children.
Yeah.
So I think the key for sermons and for for ministry, sermons, family, kids, you just got to know them. Mm-hmm. You got to take the time to get to know your people, to get to know your kids, to know what they like, don't like, whatever, and to fall into that, to lean into that.
Which means you're going to have to give them space to be who they are, which we can talk about another time too. Mm-hmm. It's like when your kids develop interest or do things that you're like, oh, well, I didn't see that coming or I don't understand it. You have to give them the space to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Man. So we're almost out of time. I wanted to kind of throw this out, just kind of a fun topic, something I thought about this past week because we do this about every night, gaming.
Yes.
And I think one of the things in marriage, husband and wives, what they lose are hobbies, things that they can do together. I think there's a lot of marriages where the wife ends up having a certain hobby. She does her thing. The husband has his hobby. He does his thing. And the only time that they're really together, hey, look who just walked in the room, Josh, our youngest.
Hi.
Josh, how are you? Come over here, buddy. You want to say hey to the podcast land?
Hey y'all, how y'all doing?
All right. We got some stuff in your braces there. What you been eating?
Cinnamon roll.
Cinnamon rolls, because it's Saturday morning.
Your
Sleeping
hair's looking
late.
good too.
Hair looks
It
great.
always does.
Yeah,
Yes.
it does always look good. That's
I
true.
never look bad.
No,
No, never.
no. And so our house sometimes is chaotic. But back to the thing as far as hobbies go, Beth and I, we found several years ago, we enjoy board gaming. And we're both very competitive. And the first real modern board game we were introduced to was Settlers of Catan, which is kind of the granddaddy of all modern board games. And we had some friends that introduced us to that game. We would get together with them every Saturday night and play games. And we would play Catan, and we had some heated battles and very competitive game. And then we started branching out into other games and different games, and so now it's turned into, we have probably 150 board games at our house, stacked up on bookcases and everything, and so we do that. We also play board games online. And we have some friends. We'll call him Ross, for example, who we board game with every night. We talked about Board Game Arena, and we sit there and we put Ross on speakerphone and we play board games. But it's finding a hobby that you and your spouse can both lean into and have fun with, and you both enjoy. So for Beth and I, like we talked about, going to Broadway shows is big for us. Playing board games is big with us. Saying hello to our daughter who's about to leave, right?
Yeah.
Say hey and bye, Maria.
Hey, bye.
Bye.
Drive careful.
I will. Love you.
Love you. All right,
Love
don't get
you.
snowed in up there.
Hopefully I won't.
Behave. All right. So Beth, what do you enjoy most about the board gaming, like you and I? Like, is it just spending time with me? Is it beating me because you're so competitive? I mean, what's the deal?
It's 100% winning. That's my favorite. No, just kidding. But I do really like winning. That's an important part. I do like the spending time together. I like learning something new together, playing something new. It just introduces some variety, like because some of these board games are so like complex and just fun. Like the concepts are fun, the art's fun, like all of it. And we've even had the ones we've done also with friends. We've met so many really interesting people I don't think we would have met otherwise, that we wouldn't have known doing it. So it's just fun, like getting us out, meeting new people, doing that stuff, learning something new together. That's fun.
Yeah, I just think, and it's something Bethany and I even do. We go out of town, we take some board games. We go to a coffee shop and we're having coffee. We break out like a little small board game, or we go out to dinner, we'll break out a little small board game, and it's just something that's fun and hobby wise, we just really enjoy. And so I thought about it last night. Like I said, just going to Wicked. I was thinking a lot about the Broadway shows we've gone and seen before, you and I, the board games we play almost nightly, just stuff. So I just want to encourage anyone out there just listening that's married, like try to figure out something with your spouse if you don't already have that. Something that you two can do together, not where he or she is reluctantly giving in and doing it because it's what you like, but it's something that y'all like, that it's something that you can do together and you have enjoyment out of. It's like a little mini date, every time you do it, whether it's going to a concert, going to a movie, just a time where you can put your phones down and not just sit there laying in bed, shoulder to shoulder, both of you staring at your phones, not talking, but something where you're engaged with one another. I just think it's important. I think hobbies in marriage are a must if you're going to keep the marriage fresh and fun.
I agree. I do. And I like that the board games, I like that we can do it just us. Sometimes we can bring our kids in. And like I said, sometimes we can meet new people. So it just gives us a lot of opportunities. And it's something we can even, sometimes it gets harder to I don't know, if your brain's tired and you don't know what you want to talk about, we can have like cards or a game in our pocket and pull that out and play that at a restaurant while we wait or whatever. It just gives us, something different to focus on and to do.
And, one of my favorite hobbies is pushing Beth's buttons.
Yes, and you're very good at it.
I have a master degree in it.
Yeah.
And so, there has been many a nights that we've been playing like Board Game Arena, Beth gets so angry at me, she slams her computer shut, goes to the bedroom, shuts the door, and goes to bed. And she's mad. And I feel like that's a win-win because obviously I've probably won the game and I just won in making Beth angry at me. And so those are fun nights. So that's even a hobby. You know, what can I do to push your buttons? And, you know, and another fun hobby is reading. I like to read. I like to lay in bed and read. Beth lays there and listens to books.
That is not at all the way it goes
So
down.
just a reminder,
Okay.
take the book poll this week. Is reading a book actually reading, or is it listening also? So I'll formulate that question somehow a little bit clearer than that. But that's our big poll for the week. So anyway, that's episode 4. We went a little longer this week than we normally do, but we had more chaos in our house, and Beth's ADHD was kicking in, and she was trying to stay focused on the podcast, but also help out her child who was running late. So I'm sure you'll be tracking her on Life 360 to see how fast she's driving.
Yep, and I'm sure I hope she's not speeding.
There you go. All right. So anyway, thanks again for listening to the Hey, Are You Still There podcast. We'll be back next Saturday. And you guys, if you're going to celebrate Thanksgiving this week, have a great Thanksgiving. And we will talk to you again next week. See you later.
Bye.